This seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be so many instances, I think, where wokeness is the opposite of what I grew up as liberalism. Liberalism was, let's give the women an equal shot. This is, let's put a male in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
It's crazy. And meanwhile, trans people who genuinely want to compete at athletics and swimming or whatever it may be, they're the ones who are suffering here. They need to be found a way to compete fairly and justly.
Social justice warriors who are fond of governing by hashtag like to say silence is violence. And we know that because it rhymes? The words victim and survivor have traveled a long way from their original usage. The baby from the Nirvana album says he's a victim. He's suing Nirvana for lifelong damages. I never thought I'd have to say this to a baby, but stop being such a baby.
Let's be honest, what we just witnessed on Real Time with Bill Maher wasn't just another political debate. It was a full-on tag team takedown featuring Bill Maher and Piers Morgan dismantling the talking points of Congresswoman Katie Porter. And they did it with that signature mix of sarcasm, sharp logic, and good old-fashioned common sense that so many people miss in today's culture wars. From the very start, Porter came in swinging against Riley Gaines, the former NCAA swimmer who's become the face of the fight for fairness in women's sports. Porter's argument, basically that Gaines should stop making noise and leave it to the sporting authorities to decide who competes where, sounds reasonable. Until you realize those authorities are often the same ones bending over backwards to appease online outrage mobs instead of protecting fairness in competition. But Maher and Morgan weren't having any of it. The moment Porter tried to paint Gaines as some kind of fame-hungry activist, Morgan cut in with facts so cold they could freeze the room. He reminded her, calmly but firmly, that Riley Gaines actually competed against transgender swimmer Leah Thomas. She didn't just tweet about it, she was there. She lost to someone who had a biological advantage, and she spoke up not for fame, but for fairness.
He should be able to have a civil debate. Nobody, including Riley Gaines, who I disagree with strongly, should feel
What do you disagree with, out of interest?
I think that it should be up to sporting bodies to make the decisions about who and how should compete.
What has she said that's actually wrong?
I think that what she has done is try to turn this. We talked about people, using things to kind of get likes and get clicks.
That's not what she's doing.
Not?
I've got no truck for Riley Gaines personally, but all I've seen her do is stand up for women's rights to fairness and equality.
Well,
she actually competed against Leah Thomas, and it was obviously unfair. Leah Thomas won one of the races in the NCAA championships by 50 seconds against a bunch of biological females who simply couldn't keep up. That cannot be right. It cannot be fair.
And let's be real, that's the heart of the debate. Is it hate to say that men and women are biologically different? Of course not. It's science. It's reality. But we've reached a point where simply acknowledging that fact can get you labeled transphobic, canceled, or shouted down on social media. And the irony? The people who claim to fight for fairness are often the ones destroying it. Maher jumped in right after, and you could feel the tone shift. This wasn't just about sports anymore. It was about something bigger. About how modern wokeness has drifted so far from traditional liberal values that it's starting to eat itself alive. I grew up believing liberalism was about giving women an equal shot, Maher said. Now it's about putting biological males in the swimming pool with them.
This seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be so many instances, I think, where wokeness is the opposite of what I grew up as liberalism. Liberalism was, let's give the women an equal shot. This is, let's put a male in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
It's crazy. And meanwhile, trans people who genuinely want to compete at athletics and swimming or whatever it may be, they're the ones who are suffering here. They need to be found a way to compete fairly and justly.
Boom, that line hit harder than a knockout punch. Because it's true, liberalism used to be about equality. It was about opportunity. But now, in the name of inclusion, we're undoing decades of progress made by women who fought tooth and nail for the right to compete on a level playing field. And think about Title IX, the 1972 law that revolutionized women's sports in America. It wasn't some symbolic gesture. It was a game changer. Literally, it gave women equal opportunities, equal funding, and equal equal recognition in college athletics. And because of it, entire generations of female athletes were able to rise, compete, and inspire millions. But now, that legacy is being quietly rewritten, all in the name of progress. Maher didn't mince words. He laid it out in plain English. Allowing biological males to compete in women's sports doesn't promote equality, it destroys it. It's not empowering women, it's erasing them. The entire purpose of Title IX, fairness, balance, opportunity, gets thrown out the window when physical advantages are ignored for the sake of political correctness.
That is something that I think our sporting bodies should be dealing with. And by the way, Riley is speaking up for herself, and that is her prerogative, and I respect her free speech.
I think she's speaking up for pretty much every female athlete in the world.
I mean, wasn't that the point of Title IX? Title IX in the early 70s was something that was it was a major event in feminism, that we finally have this law that says at colleges, right, and I think high schools too, but definitely colleges, women's sports have to be given equal to men's sports so that women aren't and this led to the WNBA and lots of other stuff.
And here's where things got interesting. Piers Morgan, never one to back down, proposed a solution that actually makes sense. Create a separate category for transgender athletes. Simple, logical, fair. That way everyone gets to compete on equal terms. No one's excluded, no one's cheated. But instead of embracing that kind of compromise, the woke crowd calls it discrimination. Let's get real here. Since when did fairness become discrimination? Since when did biology become bigotry? You can respect trans people's rights and still believe that women's sports should be for biological women. Those two ideas can coexist.
What's your answer then?
I think there's one or two answers. I think they either compete against their biological sex, as many of them did before, or you create an entirely new category for transgender athletes. And then they're able to compete fairly. But what you cannot do is continue to allow more and more trans athletes to start decimating women's records, in some cases, irrevocably. It's just not fair.
Okay, I gotta end it there.
But the woke left doesn't see nuance anymore. Everything's all or nothing. You either agree with them 100% or you're labeled a villain. And that's exactly what Maher and Morgan were pushing back against. The suffocating, joyless, performative version of activism that's taken over modern liberalism. Maher said it best. Wokeness has become the opposite of liberalism. It's no longer about open-mindedness or progress. It's about control. It's about language policing, moral superiority, and silencing anyone who dares to question the narrative. And speaking of language, Maher went off on that too. He tore into the way simple words like hate, violence, phobia, and victim have been twisted beyond recognition.
Well, here's my 8 words people need to stop redefining. Hate, victim, hero, shame, violence, survivor, phobic, and white supremacy.
Remember when words used to mean something? Now everything's violence. Disagreement is hate. Criticism is phobia. And if you stay quiet, well, that's silence is violence. Maher joked that people only believe that phrase because it rhymes. And honestly, he's right. It's catchy. It's emotional, but it's not logical. Violence is violence. Silence is silence. They're not the same thing. And that's where society's gone off the rails. We've started to blur the lines between emotional discomfort and actual harm. Being offended isn't the same as being attacked. But if you listen to some people online, you'd think disagreeing with a tweet is the same as committing a crime.
And it's not hate speech just because you disagree with it, nor is it phobic. Phobic comes from the Greek word for something one fears irrationally, like spiders or germs, but now is used as a suffix for anything you just don't like. I've been called commitment phobic. No, I don't fear commitment, I just don't want it. Other people do. Great. I don't call them single phobic. I don't like bowling. I'm not bowling phobic. And if I talk about how wrong I think it is to force women to wear a beekeeper suit all day, that's not being Islamophobic. I just don't like it. And I bet they don't either. I went as a ghost for Halloween once. I lasted about 20 minutes.
Take that all rise writer's room story Maher brought up. Apparently the writers got upset over a scene where a naked man steps into an elevator and the women inside just keep talking calmly. They said it was violence. Really? That's not violence. That's a bad day, sure, but it's not assault. It's not harm. It's just weird. But that's where we are now. Everything uncomfortable is toxic. Every awkward moment is trauma. We've turned inconvenience into oppression, and that's dangerous. Not just because it makes society fragile, but because it cheapens real suffering. When everything becomes trauma, then nothing is.
Also in the category of we just don't like it, so we're pretending it's something else, is the word violence. Last year there was a staff mutiny at the CBS drama All Rise when some of the writers, I'm sorry, I meant victims, took issue with a scene where two women are in an elevator and a naked man gets on and they just continue talking calmly. And if you think that's offensive, you should see how the guy pushed the button. But the writers on this show found the scene objectionable and sent off an email saying, two women would not calmly continue a conversation with a naked white guy running into the elevator. That is violence. No, it's not.
Maher wasn't afraid to say it bluntly. Violence involves physical harm. It leaves a mark. If you don't know the difference between hurt feelings and a black eye, maybe it's time to go back to kindergarten and relearn sticks and stones may break my bones. You know the rest.
Violence is when it hurts. It usually involves leaving a mark of some kind. Of course, innumerable things can lead to violence, but I'm sorry, you can't take that word and use it for stuff that's just scary to you or just verbal, which is something I literally learned in kindergarten. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but if you don't know how that one ends, you need to repeat kindergarten.
And speaking of overblown victimhood, Maher roasted one of the most ridiculous examples of it in pop culture history, the Nirvana baby lawsuit. Remember that? The guy who was photographed as a baby on Nirvana's iconic Nevermind album cover later sued the band, claiming lifelong damages. Maher's reaction, classic. I never thought I'd have to say this to a baby, but stop being such a baby. You could hear the crowd explode with laughter, but beyond the joke, there's a real point. We've become obsessed with victimhood. Being offended has become a badge of honor. Everyone's looking for their angle to play the oppressed card. Maybe it's for attention. Maybe it's for money. Maybe it's just easier to blame the world than to take responsibility. But whatever the reason, it's exhausting. We're living in a culture where being a victim earns more clout than being resilient.
Social justice warriors who are fond of governing by hashtag like to say silence is violence. And we know that because it rhymes? The words victim and survivor have traveled a long way from their original usage. The baby from the Nirvana album says he's a victim. He's suing Nirvana for lifelong damages. I never thought I'd have to say this to a baby, but stop being such a baby.
And Maher wasn't alone in calling it out. He, Morgan, and even comedians like Dave Chappelle have become lightning rods for saying what millions of people quietly think but are too afraid to say out loud. Chappelle especially. The guy's been called every name in the book for daring to tell jokes about gender, race, and politics. But Maher pointed out something that everyone conveniently forgets. Chappelle doesn't dog whistle. He's not afraid to say what he thinks. There's no code, no hidden message. He's just brutally honest. And that's what comedy and free speech is supposed to be about. It's supposed to challenge, provoke, and make you think.
Comedian Hannah Gadsby characterized Dave Chappelle's controversial Netflix special as hate speech dog whistling. Well, dog whistle refers to when someone puts things in code because they're afraid to come out and say what they really think. That's what you get from Dave Chappelle? He's afraid to say what he really thinks?
But in today's culture, honesty is dangerous. People are more afraid of a punchline than of losing their freedoms. Maher nailed it when he said, "I've been called commitment phobic. No, I don't fear commitment. I just don't want it." That's the difference between not liking something and being irrationally afraid of it. But somehow, society's decided that disliking anything, whether it's an ideology, a belief system, or a cultural practice, automatically makes you phobic. It's lazy labeling. It's intellectual bullying disguised as virtue. And that brings us to another one of Maher's killer points, the overuse of the word white supremacy. Now, obviously, real white supremacy exists. It's evil, it's dangerous, but when everything gets labeled white supremacy, the term loses all meaning. Maher gave the example of the SAT being called racist. Seriously? The SAT might be flawed, but calling it white supremacy because it's hard, that's not activism, that's absurdity. It's like he said, if a test question reads, Biff and Chip are sailing a yacht to an Ed Sheeran concert, how many White Claws should they bring? Then sure, maybe it's biased, but otherwise, come on.
In 2010, the New York Times used the term white supremacist on 75 occasions. Last year, over 700 times. Now, some of that, to be sure, is because Trump came along and emboldened the faction of this country that is truly white supremacist. It is, of course, still a real thing. But it shouldn't apply to something like, as more than a few have suggested, getting rid of the SAT test. Now, if we find the SAT test is slanted in such a way as to stack the deck in favor of Caucasians, if there are questions like, Biff and Chip are sailing a yacht, traveling at 12 knots to an Ed Sheeran concert on Catalina. If Catalina is 26 miles away, how many White Claws should they bring? Yes, then maybe, yes.
At the end of the day, all these moments, from Katie Porter's meltdown on live TV, to the Nirvana baby lawsuit, to the word violence being used like confetti, all point to the same underlying problem. Common sense is dying. We live in an age where feelings outweigh facts, where moral posturing beats logic, where being loud is mistaken for being right. And through it all, people like Bill Maher, Piers Morgan, and Dave Chappelle keep standing up and saying the uncomfortable things that too many are afraid to say. They're not perfect, none of them are, but they're brave enough to say what others won't. They're the few voices left who remind us that offense isn't the same as oppression, and discomfort isn't the same as danger. Because if we keep living in a world where every opinion is violence and every disagreement is hate, we'll end up silencing every honest debate left. And that's the real danger. Not words, not jokes, not TV debates, but silence. The kind of silence that comes from fear, the kind of silence that kills free thought. So maybe it's time we stop being afraid of truth. Maybe it's time we stop twisting words to fit feelings. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to bring back that old-fashioned liberal idea, the one Maher keeps fighting for, and where we can disagree, debate, and still respect each other at the end of the day. Because that's what progress really looks like. If you made it this far, here's a question for you. Do you agree with Maher and Morgan's take? Should women's sports be protected? Or should inclusion mean anyone can compete anywhere? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because the cultural battles are only heating up from here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.